So let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah,
Spencer Petras has thrown 1 touchdown, 8 picks, I think, over the last I don't know how many games.
Really?
Yeah, which is incredible to think about. I mean, just incredible.
I'm not even trying to be snarky. I'm just like,
hey, listen, you ain't gonna be. I'm not gonna be fighting.
I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but that kind of even though it came up.
I'm not gonna be fighting you on this, but I guess what I'm asking is, Iowa State has not forced a turnover in this game, in the Cyhawk game, since I believe 2015.
That's right.
So I mean, at some point, something's got to break. Something's got to give. Will Spencer Petras get off the schneid, and will he have a really clean game, or will Iowa State create at least 1 pick?
That's tough. And so I think one of the reasons for that is, one, Iowa State's defense up to this point has been good, but they're not ball hawks like Iowa's defense is. Like Iowa makes a ton of turnovers and stuff like that, and that's great. And that's what part of it fuels their offense and stuff like that, whatever, when it's working. But
I don't think it fuels the offense.
Well, it fuels something. I don't know what it does. It fuels Tory Taylor is what it does.
Yeah, it does.
But Iowa State's defense has not been a ball hawk. They've not been a big turnover machine. Iowa does not itself turn the ball over a ton unless you force them to, type of thing. Like, they don't. When the QB play is fine, at least they don't turn the ball over a ton or whatever. And Iowa State doesn't turn teams over a ton. That's part of it. I'm inclined to believe that there is a certain universal law of averages that kicks in at some point. Like, it seems pretty, like, put it this way, it seems pretty unsustainable to keep the not having committed a turnover for X number of years on a long enough timeline. I mean, like, it's not sustainable. I don't know if that's this year or not. I think Iowa State's got a lot of defenders that can give Spencer Petras a lot of problems. Especially on the defensive line, with Iowa's offensive line looking a little shaky last week. And that's going to be a really interesting point that we can talk about too, is that the defenses are probably both going to have stellar games.
Yeah, I mean, this could be like this could very easily be like the 2018 game. Like, it
absolutely could. Yeah.
Like, I know that some years that you think it's going to be one way and it's the total opposite. I don't see any. I don't see a
2000. I don't see a 2017 happening where it's a 40. There's no way. Like,
can you imagine that?
Something totally bonkers would have to, like, change for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like impossible, but it feels extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
And so I'm based on my law of averages theory, and just I think Iowa State's got a lot of people that can cause Spencer Petras a lot of problems. I'd like to think we can get a turnover this year. To certainly help, because I do think that Iowa State is more equipped to take advantage of turnovers. I don't know. We'll see.
I'll be anxious.
I would say
to see.
If I was a betting man and had to pick one team to force a turnover, I would definitely put my money on Iowa.
Okay.
Like that, no doubt. I mean, Iowa's defense is at least partially built around forcing turnovers, and Iowa State's got a younger quarterback that's never played in Kinnick before. As impressed as I am with Hunter Dekkers, and I think he's an absolute phenomenal. He's going to be a phenomenal quarterback. Still really young, and is still playing against a team that forces turnovers against virtually everybody. And especially has a really good safety. Has a really good set of safeties, which those are a lot of times those are your guys that are going to rack up the interceptions anyways. So, I don't know. I would like the turnover battle to at least be even this year.
If I'm an Iowa fan, I'm very pleased, Mark, with the performance from Quinn Schulte, who is a question mark at free safety, with Jack Kerner leaving. He's not a real big guy, but neither was Jack Kerner, and he's a former walk-on. Xavier Wampa, I kind of expected him to emerge there, but I don't know. If Quinn Schulte plays well enough, it'll be interesting to see as the season goes on where Wampa mixes in. But Jamari Harris is doubtful. That's another storyline that came out of Kirk Ferentz's press conference today, Mark. Of course, he was out game 1 because of the OWI during the offseason. So now you're down. I mean, your depth at corner, I think they're pretty comfortable with Cooper DeJean right now, just about everywhere. It's amazing. That kid, they're playing him at corner. They play, I think he started the game at corner over Terry Roberts, actually. He's playing cash. He's returning. He's in the kick return, punt return list. So I will be intrigued to see how Hunter Dekkers, like, obviously, how he can handle Kinnick, because we saw South Dakota State very well coached. Like, I think anybody who understands that program knows John Stiegelmeier's been there forever.
Yep.
It's kind of like the Kirk Ferentz of the FCS. You know what you're going to get. You're going to get sound coaching. But boy, I think that I read they had 8 false starts, and I wasn't tracking it during the game.
Yeah, it was a ton.
But you get down in that north end zone, and it is loud, and you just wonder, Hunter Dekkers has never experienced anything like this on the field. So how's he going to handle the road atmosphere in Kinnick?
We'll find out, but I'm encouraged. He's a very level-headed kid. He's a lot less. He has a lot less. If you when you watch him play, he has a lot less manic energy than Brock did, or whatever. Like when you watch Brock, like he's always fun to watch. But part of it is because he has just this natural manic energy when he's playing, or whatever. Right. Hunter Dekkers is a little bit different. He's much more of a smooth operator than Brock is. So, and he's a very level-headed kid. He's super smart. I'm inclined to believe that he'll be able to handle it. We won't know until he's there, but I think if he's got a good shot at it, I don't think he's gonna have a ton of issues. He looked like yesterday, or not yesterday, but last weekend. He looked composed, like he was going through reads really quickly. He never really looked uncomfortable. Even in the couple times that Simo was able to generate some pressure, he stepped forward, he evaded and made a nice throw on the run. He's a very composed guy. So I think that bodes really well for playing in difficult stadiums. So we'll see. But I think he's probably going to handle it at least pretty well. But we'll see. He might collapse under pressure. I have no idea.
I want to ask you this, because this hour is flying by, but I want to ask you this, Levi. Last year, I know a lot of Iowa fans got a kick out of, and I mean, I appreciate your genuineness, but a lot of Iowa fans got a kick out of you basically saying that Iowa State had the upper hand at every position, but I think one was what position was that he said that Iowa actually had an advantage over? Maybe punter? What was it, Mark? Do you remember?
Oh, I'm sure punter, yeah.
If it was individual positions, maybe it was center, but I know
center.
He grouped.
Probably center and punter, I would say. But I mean,
okay.
In my defense, though, if you look on paper last year, I probably had a pretty good argument for it.
Are we talking about both sides of the ball? We just talking about offense?
Both sides of the ball.
Offense, yes.
Both sides of the ball.
Oh, offense, definitely.
No, he said, I remember him saying that the group of linebackers at Iowa State were better than the group of linebackers at Iowa. I don't think you can
on paper. I think they absolutely were.
What does that mean on paper? They don't play the game on paper. They play the game on turf.
If you look at because Iowa had some unproven names. They had Jack Campbell, yes. The other names in there were a little bit more unproven.
Seth Benson is just as experienced as Jack Campbell, and
I have no idea who Seth Benson is. I know who Mike Rose is.
Listen, he's gonna rock your world Saturday, Levi. Because
maybe what I'm telling
what do you mean you don't know who he? I believe he caught an interception in that game last year.
He might have. Yeah, I don't remember. But the point here, I don't know if it really matters, honestly. Like, it's more just like on paper, or not. I'm not even gonna say on paper.
Okay,
it's whatever. But in my opinion, I thought Iowa State had a talent advantage, especially on offense, and they're probably at a couple spots on defense even.
Sure. Oh, okay. The reason I ask, let's do this.
It's all subjective. I mean,
yeah, sure, but let's run through it this year and see if we can come to a consensus.
Yeah,
I think it's clear that. This is sad because Hunter Dekkers is a first-year quarterback that's never played a Power 5 opponent, but I would give Iowa State the upper hand at quarterback right now, which is pretty pathetic.
Yeah.
But Mark, is that fair?
It is fair.
Okay, so they have the upper hand. Running back's an interesting one because we know Iowa State loses Breece Hall, Iowa loses Tyler Goodson. Do you like Jyrell Brock right now?
Yeah, he played really well last Saturday. He had 110 yards or something like that. He ran hard. It was good. He did a good job evading tackles. They've got a couple other guys. Eli Sanders, he'll get a lot of carries. We'll see about Cartavius Norton. I don't know about that, but Eli Sanders is a really nice back, kind of a scat back. Gets involved in the passing game quite a bit when he's in. Stuff like I would say it's got a good. I feel very good about the running.
So
backs.
I would give Iowa State the upper hand, even though I think Iowa's okay there. They just need to line it.
Is Gavin Williams playing?
He's supposed to be playing. LaShawn Williams, I thought, ran well.
So we'll see.
Yeah, so we'll see there. But I give Iowa State the advantage. We're not going to do fullback. Let's just do the O-line.
Even if you say running backs versus running game, I think Iowa State's running game is in a better place right now.
Sure. Let's do offensive line. I think without even watching the Iowa State game, although it's hard because that's really where the FBS talent gap is.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So hard to measure in a game like that.
And the pass protection was good. I mean, Hunter Dekkers had tons and tons of time to throw on Saturday. I don't know. Is that a product because SEMO's defensive line is trash? I have no idea. But in general, pass protection looked pretty good. Run blocking was hit or miss.
Okay. So I'm going to give ISU the edge there. Tight end, I think clearly
I haven't specifically like dissected Iowa's offensive line film or anything.
Well,
like
no,
that,
I'll give you that one. I'm fine with giving you that one.
I don't know much about him
based upon the performance Saturday against an FCS team, granted an upper echelon FCS team. I think Iowa clearly. I don't think we're going to argue that Iowa has a better set of tight ends this year, right? Yeah. All right. So moving
I think Easton Dean and Deshaun Hanika are good. We just don't know much about them yet.
ISU clearly takes wide receiver. Just because of Hutchinson, Iowa's down two of its top three receivers.
Jalen Knoll is a guy he's gonna get a lot of catches on Saturday. Jalen Knoll, Xavier Hutchinson, Darren Wilson. They've got quite the stable of receivers this year.
I would take Iowa's.
Dimitri Stanley is a new one. He's a transfer in this year that he's the deep threat. Like if they throw go routes, it'll be to him.
I think you take Iowa's defensive backs clearly, right? You turn the defensive back of the year.
Riley Moss, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and Kayvon Merriweather is a senior, and like I mentioned, Quinn Schulte played well.
That's another one where I really like Miles Purchase and TJ Tampa, and I think they're going to be and I thought they played really well on Saturday, but they're less proven than Riley Moss and whatever his name is.
And there's no way we can make the argument at linebacker, right? I mean, that's just, we can't do that.
No, Iowa States are too young right now. I will say Colby Reeder is one that you're going to hear his name called a lot. If you watch him play, it's almost identical to Mike Rose. I'm not saying it's hard to say if he's as good as Mike Rose because he's played one game here, but his play style is nearly identical. If he wore 23 and grew his hair out, you probably wouldn't be able to tell him apart on the field.
Defensive line, I would venture to say, even though Iowa State has Will McDonald, that Iowa's better across.
I would say Iowa State has the best individual player, but as a unit, Iowa's is probably better.
And I think we take Iowa's special teams units just based on reputation and Torrey Taylor.
I would say I think Jace Gilbert's going to be a good kicker. I think he's going to be really good. Tyler Perkins is a freshman, but freshman punters is kind of whatever. Punters are punters.
Well, of course you can't measure a game that way, but I just off what
Tyler
we just
Taylor's
went
definitely
through.
the better punter, but
sure. But you can't measure a game this way, but based on that, Mark, it's pretty even. I mean, just position by
I
position.
genuinely do think it's 100% a coin flip because I think Iowa's a 3.5 point favorite. I mean, that is just a home field advantage. That is literally all it is a home field advantage. I mean, on a neutral field, Vegas thinks it's a toss up.
Which should be a total disrespect to Iowa, Mark, because Iowa State, this should be a down year for Iowa State. Iowa has a senior quarterback with stars on defense. You've got a future NFLer at tight end and maybe a second future NFLer behind him. I mean, that's a disgrace. An Iowa players should use that as motivation. I don't know that they will. I mean, if they can, the offense will. I mean, the defense I expect to show up. I think this is going to be a low scoring game. I know we said that earlier, but I could easily see a 10-12 type game that comes down to a field goal from either side. And listen, both sides have had their fair share of close wins. I think of the Cole Netton game in 2014 in Kinnick. And that was was that the most recent win? That was the most recent win in this series for Iowa State, was on a game-winning field goal in Kinnick for Iowa State. So now Campbell has never won there, but I'm intrigued by it. And specifically the quarterback position. I cannot imagine Spencer Petras having a worse game than he did again on Saturday, but he's going up against a much better defense with an outstanding pass rusher in Will McDonald. I do wonder, here's my one thing that I do question. Will we see a quarterback change during the game if Spencer Petras is as bad as he was in the first half against South Dakota State? Because as hard-headed as Kirk is with this right now, and I think he's doubled down, and I have a feeling, Mark, that he kind of resents the fans a bit, and which is really a bad thing, and that's why I'm not real. I'm a little uneasy.
That's a tough sentence.
Well, it's just, I mean, when your fans are booing you in the first quarter of the first game of the season, not great. But I've said I don't judge the fans for doing that. They're paying to be there, and they see the product in the field after waiting over 8 months for the season to start. So I just wonder, how long will it take? How much will it take for Kirk to say, okay, we have to make a change, and we're not going to fall back on Spencer was hurt, because that's what he did last year in the Northwestern game. And moving forward, he never, ever claimed that the change at quarterback was due to performance, not once. And so he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to admit that they were wrong, and that whether it be Padilla or it be Labus, I don't expect it to be Labus. I think they'd much rather take their hand with a guy they have experience with. I'll be interested to see what happens there.
The question is if let's say Iowa State's defense is flying around and getting them down in the backfield and stuff like that, do you want to Do you want to put in Padilla, who hasn't played a lot of snaps? Do you want to put him in there and potentially hurt his confidence or whatever it is, or do you just ride Petrus out in a game?
He played enough.
It probably depends on the score, I guess. If Iowa State's winning by a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter or something like that, then it's probably a different story. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm literally just posing the question. I'm not asking.
I think it's classic Kirk Ferentz that if Petrus is not playing well, but the game's close, that he'll stay with him.
Right.
But if they're down by a couple scores,
and the problem with that,
although that should have nothing to do with his evaluation of his quarterback situation, that he'll play.
I think if Kirk thinks he can win the game with the people he's got in the game, he's going to stick with them, even if they're playing bad.
And the problem with that philosophy is it's not fair to Alex Padilla, because he comes in a game where you're down 2 or 3 scores. I don't expect Iowa State to come in. If Iowa State comes in and blows Iowa out, then it's pitchforks, it's torches.
I guess.
What's that?
What would you consider a blowout? Like if Iowa State comes in, like is Iowa State winning by 2 touchdowns? Is that a blowout for you?
I think that if they come in and win by 2 touchdowns, I think there's some serious upheaval.
It probably kind of depends on how it happens, but
I think if they lose the game in general, people are going to be on fire, because people were on fire after the win.
Oh yeah, no, I mean yeah. I'm not saying will Iowa fans be pissed. I'm just like what would you consider just a loss? Iowa State played well and that's what it is, or is it like what happens if like I don't know if maybe you don't have a line of what becomes a blowout versus what becomes just a
yeah, I mean I think anything more than I think double digits is a blowout in my mind.
The reason I'm asking is because I think if Iowa wins this game, it's something close and low scoring, like a 13-10 or something like that. So something really low down there like that, maybe single digits. Who knows? If Iowa State wins, they probably are winning by a couple touchdowns. I don't think Iowa State's going to be as well suited to win a close Rock'em Sock'em Robots game where it's a 2 or 3 point game. I don't like Iowa State's odds in that. It's just because the experience factor and having an elite defense that turns people over is super critical there. If Iowa State is winning, it's probably because the offense is pushing the ball downfield. They're picking on Riley Moss and he's not picking them off, type of thing. Whatever it is, like they're pushing the ball downfield and they're getting aggressive and they're creating explosive plays on offense, which can produce a couple extra touchdowns. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Is if Iowa State's going to win, it's probably going to be by at least a touchdown. If I was winning, it's probably close. And that's not to say that Iowa State's a better team and Iowa can only win close. But if each team is playing the way that they're going to be able to most effectively win the game, that's going to, in my mind, that's how it's going to play out.
2 things.
My worst case scenario for Iowa, other than a blowout, 31-3, they lose, but it's another inept offensive performance, and it's the defense playing lights out, great game. They lose 10-3, and they may lose 10-3 because Petrus threw a pick that got the ball to the 25-yard line for the Iowa State offense, and they lose 10-3, 10-6, something in that range. And it's, wow, wasted great defense, special teams. The offense is inept, and we lose this game that we shouldn't lose.
Let me say this, though. I do not agree with Levi on one thing, and that is I don't see a scenario where Iowa State, I could squint and maybe see a 10-point win if things go haywire. And you brought up picking on Riley Moss. I do believe that it's in Iowa State's best interest to pick on Riley Moss and to test him because he did get burned at times last year.
I hope they put Xavier Hutchinson on him and let him just go after him.
My guess is they won't do that. My guess is that he'll be matched up with Cooper DeJean and Terry Roberts most of the day.
Well, because if I remember correctly, Iowa likes to play a zone where they play sides, basically. Riley Moss has a side. So from Iowa State's perspective, I would assume they would try to line him up in front of Riley Moss.
Why would you line him? I mean, no, listen, I'm not saying that I believe he was the best defensive back in the Big Ten last year, but you're going to say we're going to pick the best defensive back in the Big Ten or the guy who won the Defensive Back of the Year award. I mean, to me, you take advantage of the one side of the field, or he's not.
I view him a lot like people view Trayvon Diggs for the Cowboys. Racked up a ton of interceptions. Would anybody call him the best quarterback in football?
No, I'm not saying he is. I agree with you to an extent, but I do believe he's their best corner is what I'm saying.
Probably, but but Xavier Hutchinson is also a stellar route runner. He's an amazing route runner.
So why not take advantage of a guy like Cooper DeJean who's never been in this moment before?
because
or
I
Terry
think,
Roberts.
Well, and that's certainly maybe something they will do. I think I would say there's a couple. If you're going to try to pick on Riley Moss, they probably have a couple different options they could do that with. Demetrius Stanley is a burner down the sideline. I mean, they can send him deep and just try to force Riley Moss to cover on an island 40 yards downfield, which is one of the hardest things to do on the defensive side of the ball. So, who they put out there, I'm not sure. I think they will. I think you'll probably see a pretty heavy dose of Xavier Hutchinson no matter what, just because he's such a good route runner. He is to Iowa State what Devontae Adams was to the Packers. He's not a super fast guy. He's not necessarily super strong or super tall. He's just incredibly good at his job. He just gets open, catches the ball, gets yards after the catch. That's what he does. And you're going to probably see a fairly heavy dose of him, I think.
And my one criticism of John Stiegelmeier last week, and I guarantee you, Mark, on tape, that's one thing they looked back at Sunday night and said, man, that's where we could have taken control. They had a deep ball to one of the Yankee brothers in that first half of the Iowa game that had it not been overthrown, it was a touchdown. And maybe South Dakota State wins that game. Mathematically, you could jump to that conclusion. And so I think that's one thing that they're probably kicking themselves, that they didn't attack down the field more and test those corners, because I still think that Riley Moss did prove, like Levi pointed out, that last year at times he was vulnerable to biting and not being disciplined in coverage. And Phil Parker, and I remember at Media Day, I asked him pointedly, is that an area where you see a jump? Why, an area where Riley can improve to a point where he is a, 2, 3, 4th round draft pick in the NFL draft next year? And he basically agreed and said, I don't think Riley played great last year. And I think he'd agree with that. But he has got to prove it. South Dakota State did not test that on Saturday. And I think with Iowa State's ability to move the ball downfield, they traditionally, especially under Matt Campbell, have ran trick plays, or at least plays that I was not expecting. If you want to call those trick plays, I'm talking about I'm trying to think of the double pass.
You're probably thinking of like the double pass from Michael Petway.
Correct. That's an example of one. I know, but what I'm saying, but let's remember, Levi, it's not like a ton of points have been scored in this series over the last 3 meetings. And that was one of the few touchdowns that was scored. So I see a play like that in there against a guy like Riley Moss or one of the younger guys like Cooper DeJean.
And I think what's worth noting is that the first game does seem to at least confirm some of our notions that Iowa State is going to be a more vertical offense. Because, like, when you had all these tight ends and Brace Hall and stuff like that, the offense had a tendency to get really methodical, where they're just dinking and dunking all the way up the field, and sometimes it's really hard to do. This offense appears to be more vertically oriented, which is a different look than I was typically used to seeing from Iowa State, because much to my extreme annoyance, Matt Campbell has decided he wants to try to beat Iowa by playing Iowa's game. I do not understand why, but he has done it up to this
maybe
point.
He won't this year. Maybe he won't.
And that's what I'm saying is I think if there's ever been a roster under Matt Campbell to try to not do that, this is probably it, where you have you have a bunch of players, one, that you don't have a lot of film on. Iowa doesn't have a lot of film on left-handed quarterback Hunter Dekkers, because remember that everything's backwards against a lefty or whatever. So that's something. I don't know if it is anything, but who knows? And it's a player that they don't have a lot of tape on, and they don't have a lot of tape on an offense that does appear to be trying to push the ball downfield a little bit more. So it'll be a different look for Iowa. I'm not saying they can't handle it, but it'd be a different look. And this appears to be a team capable of trying to do something different from what Matt Campbell has tried to beat Iowa with up to this point, which has been wildly unsuccessful. And
just for the record, I mean, this can be, I know we're trying to wrap this thing up, but I predicted Iowa winning this game prior to the season. I'm not backing down from that prediction. I still think Iowa should win this game, because I don't believe that offense can be as bad as it was Saturday. Although, Levi, I said during the entire offseason that I believe the offense has to get better, because it almost can't get any worse. You can't get much worse than being a 123rd out of 130 teams ranked in total offense. And even though I believe they were worse on Saturday, logic, you talked about just logic of assuming that eventually things turn around, odds and whatnot. I think I would say the same thing about Iowa's offense. I think it has to get better.
It's worth noting that, historically speaking, Brian Ferentz has probably called his best games against Iowa State. I don't know if that's
minus Ohio State and USC, maybe.
Yeah, but that's once every decade for those teams or whatever. But generally speaking, on a year-to-year basis, Brian typically calls his best game against Iowa State. I don't know if he's just more focused or whatever it is. He typically does get more aggressive against Iowa State. I'm thinking back to 2019, where they were kind of pushing the ball downfield a little bit with Nate Stanley and stuff like that, or they were trying to. And he gets a little bit more aggressive against Iowa State. So, I would assume they'll probably score a touchdown Saturday. And I would just because I think they will try to be more aggressive. And that's history shows that's kind of what Brian Ferentz does against Iowa State anyways.
What do you guys think the over-under is for this game?
I would guess like in the 20s. Is that possible for it to be that?
Are we trying to guess the actual over-under?
The over-under, according
Oh,
to
you want me
from Vegas? Oh,
yeah, what Vegas is.
I would
line
say
is.
probably 37.5 or both.
I was
37.
going to say I would go lower than that. I was going to say, yeah. I mean,
37's not that many points though. I mean, a 20-18 game hits the over.
if it's 37, I'm taking the under all day and all night. Holy
Well,
cow!
It's 41.5.
Okay, alrighty. I'm serious. I was serious when I said
if I was a 3.5 point favorite, what are we looking at? 23-18, 24-7. No.
Yeah, well, it'd be 20.
How does that work out?
22-19.
22-19.
I was serious when I said that if I was creating the over under, it'd be like 28-29. I mean, seriously, I just 10-13.
Well, you still can't overreact from the one game. The one game was putrid, but still.
It's not.
As much as I would like to overreact to and just absolutely bury Iowa's offense on the ground, I have to assume that they're probably going to score a touchdown.
Yeah, correct. Right.
I mean, 30 is a really low over under.
I know it is. That's why
extraordinarily low over under. I mean, I would say I would have said 37 only based on the fact that Vegas would be looking at that Iowa score from last week is like, well, Iowa's got nothing on offense, but they've got a really good defense or whatever. So that should theoretically drag the whole thing down. But
I'm not for the record, I'm not a betting man, but I would never ever count on this game going above 41.
The over feels pretty unlikely to me. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, think of it this way: even if there's a blowout, a 30-10 blowout, that still doesn't hit the over under.
And which of these teams is scoring 30? Is it Iowa State's offense versus Iowa's defense, or Iowa's offense?
It feels unlikely that either team hits 30 points, but
yeah. Did you guys see how many touchdowns were scored in the fourth quarter of the North Carolina Appalachian State game?
Because Appalachian State scored
40. 40 by Appalachian State.
Or 6 touchdowns by themselves?
Yes, there were 10 touchdowns scored in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I saw the memes out there of pairing Iowa's offense with UNC's defense. What would that be like?
That'd be an over 30 is what that is.
That'd be an awful team.
One more thing before we finish this up, Mark. I know you got to put a plug in for your sponsor, but let me just add this as it relates to the score of this game. I could easily see a scenario where Iowa is hanging in there throughout this game because of the defense, and late in the game it comes down to similar to what happened in 2019. And I would still give Iowa the edge there because in a situation like that, oftentimes it does come down to special teams and one kick or a punt or just fielding a punt like in 2019. So I think Iowa does have the advantage in 2 of the 3 units. Iowa controls the narrative of this game, Mark, regardless of what Iowa State has on the table, because Iowa has, not only do you have the home crowd, you have your defensive unit and your offensive unit are 2 extremes. And they're so extreme that the defense can control Iowa State's scoring and the offense will control their own scoring. So I really do believe that you can be confident that this game will, I just can't foresee a scenario unless Keegan Johnson walks out like Adam Sandler did at the halftime of the Waterboy game. I don't see any way that Iowa moves the ball downfield consistently. Maybe you hit on one, I hope that they throw the ball downfield, right? Maybe you can get a deep ball to Arlen Bruce or Brody Brecht is a guy that Iowa State fans are familiar with because they were in on him in recruiting. But boy, he hadn't played hardly any football. He's been playing baseball. So I just don't know who you get vertically down the field. And do you have a line that can give Petrus time to do it? And certainly don't have confidence in Petrus to make the throw. So I just don't foresee a scenario where this game is in the 30s maybe I can squint and see the 20s. I mean, I guess that's where it would probably have to be to get to that 41 number.
The way I kind of see this is I think both defenses are probably going to have a really good day. I see that the problem here is that there's two factors here that are battling in my head. Is like, one, Iowa State got abused by Torrey Taylor last year. Enough to make me convert him to made me add to my list of now 3 Iowa players that I really desperately wish Iowa State had on my team, along with Bob Sanders and Micah Hyde. But we'll see. The special teams makes me nervous, and Iowa's propensity for forcing turnovers and Iowa State's lack of propensity for forcing turnovers makes me nervous. If those things are even-ish. Because Iowa's kicking game is probably going to be good, but they don't have a Keith Duncan. All right, the kicker is thus far seems like he's fine, but you don't feel like he's money like Keith Duncan is.
Oh, I think I think the guy that hasn't kicked yet is a future start kicker, but he's not being played. I don't know if that's because of his age or what. But
if Iowa State can keep turnovers even or very close to even, and the special teams game is largely a net zero. The tricky part here is that both defenses are probably going to play well, but one offense is more capable of overcoming a good defense than the other one, and that's Iowa State. They have more weapons. They have the better quarterback.
So with that, you're picking Iowa State then, am I right?
That I don't know. That's my issue. And it's in Kinnick, so that's an other little thing here. Even during the season, you can watch listen to all my pods and watch all my shows. I was largely chalking this one up as an L over the offseason. Last Saturday has made me rethink that a little bit, just because Iowa State did play really well and Iowa State's offense was so bad. I think it's going to be close either way, but because of this game and because I desperately hate Iowa with all my heart and soul, I'm going to say 42-10 clones.
So with that being said, we've broken it down with logic and reasoning. With that being said, throw all that out the window.
To hell with all that. This is a rivalry.
Well, I'm going to save my pick for my channel here later in the week, Mark, but boy, it's a lot more. Fans are going to be sweating a lot more than they expected, because this is probably on my top 5 or 6 games that I thought were the easiest games on the schedule. No disrespect to Iowa State, but when you have the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and you're at home against
about time you had to play Ohio State.
So,
Third time since realignment, baby.
You do realize they don't control the conference schedule, right?
I know.
They
I'm
don't
just
control.
saying they haven't played Ohio State a lot.
Sure.